Real stories of werewolves, of dogmen from history, from your emails, illustrated and animated with the democratizing magic of machine learning AI. Welcome to Scary Stories.
The Familiar Dogman. Dear Scary Stories NYC, I saw him again last night. The dogman or werewolf-type creature stood upright on its hind legs, like a man, at the edge of my property line, where the manicured grass gives way to the wild tangle of oak and pine that stretches back into the state forest. I had never seen anything like him before, and yet, strangely, he seemed incredibly familiar to me, as though I should have known exactly who that was. Moonlight caught the silver-gray fur along his massive shoulders, and I could see the rise and fall of his chest as he breathed. He must have been 7 or 8 feet tall, with the powerful haunches of a wolf, but the upright posture of a man. His head turned toward my bedroom window, and for a moment, I swear our eyes met through the glass. I didn't move from my position by the curtain. Experience has taught me that sudden movements send him melting back into the shadows, and I've grown hungry for these little glimpses. His face is lupine like a wolf, but somehow more expressive than any wolf's. Intelligence burns behind those amber eyes, and sometimes I feel like I'm catching what almost looks like recognition there, as though he knew me. He lifted his muzzle into the air, tested the wind, and I pressed closer to the window. The rational part of my mind cataloged the impossibility of what I was seeing. The other part, the part that's been growing stronger these past months, whispered a name I'm afraid to say out loud. After several minutes, he turned and loped into the trees, disappearing so completely it might have been a dream. But the impressions of his massive paws in the soft earth by the fence line are still there this morning, deeper than any dog's prints, with claw marks that gouge the soil. This is the 4th time I've seen him since Boris the spider came back. The timing can't be coincidence. Back before the dogman, there was Boris. He insisted everyone call him Boris the spider, a nickname he'd earned from the tarantula tattooed across the back of his right hand. The spider's body sat in the center of his knuckles, its legs stretching down his fingers like he could make it crawl with a simple gesture. I met Boris at a bar on the wrong side of town, back when I thought dangerous men were exciting, instead of, well, actually dangerous. He was all leather jacket and motorcycle boots, with pale eyes that seemed to see right through you. The spider tattoo should have been warning enough, but I was 20 and stupid, and when he asked me to move in with him after only 3 weeks, I said okay. The house was his grandmother's old place, a small ranch with yellowing siding and a chain-link fence that he'd inherited when she died. It sat on 2 acres at the end of a dead-end road, with woods pressing close on 3 sides. Privacy, he called it, but I learned soon enough that isolation was a more accurate word. Boris worked construction, when he felt like it, which wasn't often. Mostly he drank beer and worked on motorcycles he never finished fixing. He had opinions about everything. My clothes, my friends, my job at the diner, and he wasn't shy about sharing them. At first I told myself he was just passionate, maybe protective. When he started following me to work, I actually called it romantic. The spider on his hand wasn't his only tattoo. Prison ink covered his arms, crude skulls and barbed wire. He'd done 3 years for assault when he was younger, something he mentioned casually, like it was a badge of honor. I stayed there for 2 years. 2 years of walking on eggshells, of making excuses for bruises, of telling myself things would get better. The house felt like a trap, and Boris like the spider waiting in the center of its web. By the end, I was barely leaving except for work, and even then, he'd time my trips to the minute. The day everything changed started like any other. I was coming out of the Kroger with a bag of groceries, fishing for my keys in the bottom of my purse, when Boris appeared beside my car. I hadn't seen him in the parking lot, but that wasn't unusual. He was good at watching without being seen. "You were supposed to be home an hour ago," he said, and I could smell the beer on his breath even though it was barely 2 in the afternoon. I had to wait in line, I lied, although I had actually stopped at the pharmacy to pick up birth control pills without telling him. See, Boris didn't believe in birth control. He said that wasn't natural, but I'd secretly been taking the pills for months. He grabbed my wrist, his fingers finding the same tender spots he always did. Don't lie to me, Sarah. I drove by here 40 minutes ago and your car was already in the lot. The spider tattoo was inches from my face, and I found myself staring at it instead of meeting his eyes. I ran into someone from work, I lied. We talked. Yeah? Who? Just Linda from the morning shift. His grip tightened. Linda's the one married to that mechanic, right? The one with the shop on 4th Street? I nodded, confused by the question. Funny thing, Boris said, leaning closer. I just saw Linda at the gas station across the street. She's been there the whole time, cleaning windshields. My stomach dropped. I'd been caught in a lie, and we both knew what that meant. Boris's pale eyes went flat and cold, the way they always did before things got bad. Please, I whispered, not here. But he was already pulling me toward his truck, his fingers digging into my arm hard enough to leave marks. People were walking past us in the parking lot, but no one looked twice. Just another couple having a disagreement. And that is when I heard the voice. Hey! Deep, calm, with an inch of authority that made Boris stop mid-step. Let go of her. We both turned. The man standing behind us was tall, maybe 6'4", with dark hair and the kind of build that suggested he worked with his hands. He wore jeans and a gray t-shirt, nothing special, but there was something about the way he held himself that made the parking lot feel a lot smaller. You mind your own business, Boris said, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. The stranger's dark eyes never left Boris's face. I am minding my business, and I told you to let go of her. This is my girlfriend, Boris said, tightening his grip on my arm. We're having a private conversation. No, the man said simply. You're not. What happened next was almost too fast to follow. Boris let go of me and took a swing at the stranger, but the tall man caught his wrist mid-punch and twisted, sending Boris to his knees on the asphalt. The movement was fluid and practiced, like he'd done it 100 times before. Walk away, genius, the stranger told Boris. Don't come back. Boris scrambled to his feet, his face flushed with embarrassment and rage. He looked at me, then at the stranger, and for a moment I thought he might try again. But instead he spat on the ground and stalked back to his truck. Are you okay? The stranger asked, turning to me. I nodded, rubbing my arm where Boris had grabbed me. Thank you. He told me his name was Paul, and when he smiled, something loosened in my chest that I hadn't realized was tight. You want to get some coffee? He asked. I think your boyfriend's going to sit in that truck for a while waiting to see what you do. I looked over at Boris's truck. I saw him gripping the steering wheel and staring at us through the windshield. Paul was right. He'd follow me wherever I went, and whenever we got there, he'd make me pay for embarrassing him in public. Yeah, I said, surprising myself, I would like some coffee. Paul waited while I put my groceries in my car, then walked me to a diner on the other side of the parking lot. I didn't look back, but I could feel Boris watching us as we left. Paul didn't even really ask me to move in. We just started moving my stuff over that night. I should have been nervous about moving so fast, but Paul felt like safety in a way that I'd almost forgotten existed. He was gentle with me, careful not to touch my arm where Boris had grabbed me until the bruises faded. He listened when I talked. He didn't interrupt with his own opinions about how I should think or feel. When I woke up screaming from nightmares about the spider tattoo, he held me until the shaking stopped. Paul worked as a contractor, specializing in custom carpentry. His hands were always slightly rough from sawdust and honest work, so different from Boris's soft fingers that only knew how to take and to hurt. Paul would leave early in the morning and come home tired but content, sometimes bringing me small gifts. A piece of interesting wood grain, a flower he found growing wild at a job site. Once, a smooth river stone that fit perfectly in my palm. His house felt like home. Paul reinforced the locks on the doors and installed motion sensor lights all around the perimeter. He never said it was because of Boris, but we both knew. He taught me how to use the baseball bat he kept beside the bed, though his presence alone seemed to be deterrent enough. I saw Boris drive by a few times in those first few weeks. slowing down as he passed, but he never did stop. "He's afraid of you," I told Paul one evening as we watched another slow pass from the living room window. Paul's jaw tightened. "He should be afraid of me." There was something in his voice that made me look at him more carefully. In the dim light, his features seemed sharper somehow, more angular. When he turned to meet my gaze, his eyes caught the lamplight and reflected it back, like an animal's would. "Paul?" He blinked and the moment passed. "Sorry, I was just thinking about work tomorrow." But I'd seen something in that brief flash, something wild and protective, and not entirely human. I told myself it was just a strange light, just my imagination still jumpy from months of living with Boris's threats. Paul was gentle, civilized, everything that Boris wasn't. The idea that he might be hiding something dangerous seemed impossible. Except sometimes, late at night, I'd wake to find his side of the bed empty and the back door slightly ajar. In the morning, I'd find mud on the kitchen floor and I'd wonder where he'd gone in the darkness. If I would ask him, he would just smile and say he stepped out for air and he couldn't sleep. His explanations were always reasonable sounding, but something in his eyes suggested deeper truths that he wasn't ready to share. Everyone called her Morgana, although Paul said that wasn't her real name. She ran a shop downtown called Moonrise Curiosities. It sold crystals and tarot cards and herbs with names I couldn't pronounce. She was attractive, but in a way that made me feel plain. All flowing dark hair and knowing eyes, with silver rings on every finger, and a laugh that sounded like wind chimes. I first saw her at the farmer's market, buying bundles of sage and something the vendor called Devil's Claw. She moved through the crowd like she owned the space, and people stepped aside without seeming to realize they were doing it. When she smiled at Paul across the vegetable stand, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the October morning. "Who's that?" I asked, but Paul was already walking toward her. I watched them talk. I saw the way he leaned in close to hear her over the market noise. She touched his arm when she laughed, and something twisted in my stomach. When Paul returned to my side, he was distracted and distant in a way I'd just never seen before. "She's someone I know," he said, but his eyes kept drifting back to where she stood. After that, Paul started staying out later. He'd come home from work and shower, then disappear for hours with vague explanations about meeting friends or running errands. I'd smell unfamiliar perfume on his clothes, something earthy and wild, like burning leaves and night-blooming flowers. I drove by Moonrise Curiosities one evening, and I saw his truck parked outside. Through the window, I could see them sitting together at a small table, her hands covering his as she spoke intently. Candles flickered between them, and shadows danced on the walls in patterns that seemed too purposeful to be random. When I confronted him about this later, Paul did not deny it. "Morgana's teaching me things," he said, which was somehow worse than if he'd lied. "What kinds of things?" I asked. "Things about myself. Things about what I am." The way he said it made my skin crawl. "What are you?" "Paul, you're scaring me." He reached for me then, and I saw something wild flicker behind his eyes again. "I would never hurt you. You have to believe that. But there are parts of me which I've kept hidden, because I didn't want to frighten you." "What parts?" I asked. But he was already pulling away, grabbing his keys from the counter. "I need to go. We'll talk about this tomorrow." That was the last time I ever saw him. His truck was gone in the morning. His clothes were missing from the dresser. He left no note, no explanation, just an empty space where he had once been. I called his phone until the voicemail box was full. I drove to every job site where he had worked. I even went to Moonrise Curiosities, but the shop was empty, a for lease sign already in the window. The woman at the real estate office said Morgana had paid her lease through the end of the month, then disappeared overnight. No forwarding address, no contact information, beyond a phone number that led to a dead line. Paul had vanished as completely as if he had never existed, leaving me alone in his house that no longer felt safe without him. 3 weeks later, Boris returned. 3 weeks of me jumping at every sound, checking the locks twice before bed, sleeping with the baseball bat Paul had given me. 3 weeks of watching for his truck, of taking different routes to and from work, of wondering if Paul's disappearance had somehow signaled that I was unprotected again. Boris chose a Thursday night when rain was drumming against the windows and the power had flickered twice. I was in the kitchen making tea when I heard the knock. 3 sharp raps that made my blood freeze because I recognized the rhythm. Boris had always knocked like that, like he was entitled to an answer. I didn't go to the door, but I heard his voice anyway. "I know you're in there. I saw your car in the driveway." I reached for my phone to call 911, but my hands were shaking so badly I could hardly hold it. Through the kitchen window, I could see his shadow moving around the perimeter of the house, testing windows, looking for an opening. "Where's your fancy boyfriend?" Boris called out, his voice closer now, maybe by the back door. "Haven't seen his truck around lately. Did he finally get tired of you?" The door handle rattled, and I realized with cold horror Paul had never given me a key to the new deadbolt he'd installed. It was still locked, but Boris was persistent, and I could hear him working at something, maybe trying to jimmy the lock or force the frame. "Can't hide from me forever," he said. "I know you're scared, and I know you're alone." I crept toward the front of the house, thinking maybe I could slip out and run to my car, but through the living room window I saw Boris's truck parked sideways across the driveway, blocking my escape. He had planned this. He had been watching and waiting for the right moment. The back door creaked, and I knew he was inside with me. "Come on, baby. I just want to talk with you." I could hear him moving through the house, his boots heavy on the hardwood floor. I pressed myself against the wall beside the kitchen doorway, gripping the baseball bat with both hands. My heart was pounding so hard, I almost felt he could hear it. "I missed you, honey," he said, and I could tell he was in the living room now, getting closer. Things could go back to the way they were. We were good together, remember? That's when I heard it. A sound like nothing I'd ever heard before. A roar that seemed to come from the earth itself, deep and primal and full of rage. It rattled the windows and it seemed to vibrate in my bones. Boris stopped talking. Through the kitchen window, I saw a shape moving in the backyard. Massive, upright, covered in dark fur. The motion sensor lights flickered on, and I got my first clear look at the Dogman. He was even larger than I'd imagined, his shoulders broader than any human's, his face a terrifying blend of wolf and man. His lips were pulled back in a snarl that revealed teeth like ivory daggers. "Jesus H. Christmas," Boris whispered. I heard him stumble backward. The Dogman's head turned toward the house, and those amber eyes found me through the window. For a moment, we stared at each other through the glass, predator and prey, and I should have been terrified. But instead, I felt something I couldn't name. Recognition, maybe. Then he threw back his head and he howled, a sound that made every dog in the neighborhood start barking. It was a challenge, a warning, a promise of violence that made my primitive brain scream at me to run. Boris didn't need the warning twice. I heard him crash through the front door. I heard his boots pounding across the porch. His truck engine roared to life, and he peeled out of the driveway so fast his tires left rubber on the asphalt. When I looked back through the window, that Dogman was now gone. That was almost half a year ago, and I haven't seen Boris one time since. But I have seen the Dogman. He comes when the moon is full, and sometimes when it isn't. Always at night. Always watching from the tree line. I've stopped being afraid of him, because I've begun to understand something that my rational mind rejects, but my heart knows to be true. He's protecting me. I've started leaving food out. Raw meat from the butcher shop. Sometimes just scraps for my own dinner. In the morning it's always gone, and sometimes there are those massive paw prints in the soft earth nearby. I tell myself I'm feeding a stray dog, but I know better. The resemblance grows stronger each time I see him. The way he holds his head, the intelligence in his eyes, the careful way he moves despite his size. Sometimes I catch him watching me through the window, There's something so human in his expression, it just takes my breath away. I've done research, read every book I can find about werewolves and shapeshifters and ancient curses. Most of it is nonsense. Some of the older texts mention women who practiced the old ways. Women who could change a man's very nature if they knew the right words and the right rituals. Like Morgana. He had said she was teaching him about what he was. The timing haunts me. Paul disappears when a woman rumored to practice black magic shows up in his life. Then suddenly there's a creature in the woods who protects me the way Paul used to. A creature whose eyes hold the same gentle intelligence that I used to see in Paul's face. I know how crazy it sounds. I know that grief and fear can make you see connections that aren't there, make you believe impossible things because the truth is too painful to accept. But late at night, when I see that familiar silhouette moving through the trees, I whisper Paul's name into the darkness. Sometimes I swear the Dogman pauses when he hears it, his great head turning toward my voice, like he's trying to remember something he's forgotten. And in those moments, I let myself believe that somewhere inside that powerful, dangerous form, Paul is still protecting me, the only way he can. The moon is full tonight, and I'm waiting by the window again. I'm waiting to see if the man I loved has become the monster who guards me, and I'm wondering if I'll ever be brave enough to find out for sure. He's a guy who's got it going on. I'm talking about today's EP named John. Everybody please say thank you to John Carnagan, who made this episode possible by donating to us by using YouTube's thanks button. Here to find out the ways you can help this channel stay online is our international TV spokesmongrel, Henry Lee Dogman. Hank! Thanks, Biggie. And thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button. Or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after I think 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.